Hey guys, today we're going to do an r/NoSleep, and this one is titled, I can see timers above people's heads. When they reach 0, they die. It all started when I was born. I saw numbers above people's heads, but before I started going to school, I was too young to understand. And then, when I finally learned to count and shouted to my mother that she has a big number above her head, she dismissed it as childish gibberish. I tried talking to my father about it, about how he had a significantly lower number above his own head, but just like my mother, he dismissed my claims. By the time I realized what it meant, it was too late. My father's numbers significantly decreased, and he died 3 years later in a car crash. The last I saw him, there was a 1 floating above his head. By then, I was already in elementary school and knew bigger numbers, so I realized that the numbers represented hours. My mother had a solid 400,000 hours left above her head, which translated to around 34 years. Everyone around me had numbers, some big, some small, some extremely small. I tried talking to my mom again about it when I was 12, but got the same dismissive responses years ago. I tried mentioning it to a couple of close friends too, but the looks I got from them were ones of bewilderment at best. From there, I decided not to talk to anyone about it to avoid them having to think I'm crazy. It was hard to ignore such a thing. It was difficult going to your local shop and seeing the same elderly shopkeeper with the number 12,000 above his head, and seeing that number decrease every day you came to buy something, until one day he was no longer there. It was confusing seeing the number 300 above your math teacher's head, and then one day the principal coming into the classroom to tell everyone that Mrs. Withers died from a rare disease she had. Most of all, it was difficult seeing the numbers decrease on your loved ones' heads while they seemed to be completely oblivious to it. When I got to the age of 15, I tried stopping deaths of other people, whether they were relatives or strangers. More often than not, they would refuse to listen to me, so I started using cunning tactics, like occupying them before their deaths. In my mind, if I got them to be elsewhere, rather than wherever they're supposed to be at the time of their death, I could save them. Nothing ever worked, and they always died, no matter what I tried. So I not only failed in saving them, but I also traumatized myself by seeing some of them die right in front of me. At the age of 17, I broke down and talked to my mother one more time about it. I expected her to dismiss my claims again, but she just silently listened to me instead. When I told her about the numbers and about how I can tell when people will die, about how I saw my dad's numbers before he died, she tried finding a logical explanation. I knew that the only way to convince her that this wasn't imaginary was to prove it to her. We went out, and I saw an old lady with the numbers 37 above her head. I stopped her and asked what her name was. She told me her name was Julianne Bellick, albeit with some skepticism in her tone, and my mother intervened to apologize for my behavior. I told my mom that she would die in 37 hours, and she didn't believe me until we saw her picture in the obituary a few days later. Although in denial at first, my mother believed me eventually and accepted that what I had couldn't be explained by science. When she asked about the numbers above her own head, I told her, and she seemed content after calculating them. She asked me about the numbers above my own head though. I hesitated. I didn't see any numbers above my own head. Even when I looked in the mirror, I saw other people's numbers, but not my own. I hadn't even thought about it thoroughly by then, because up until a certain age, I spent my entire life believing that everyone saw these numbers and that we just couldn't see our own. My mother told me to keep this to myself because others wouldn't believe me or they would try to harm me. Over the years, I tried helping various people, but nothing I did ever stopped their deaths. Eventually, instead of trying to stop it, I decided to be kind to them instead. Whether they were a rude stranger or a good friend, I tried offering them acts of kindness, while subtly pointing out to the fact that our time on this earth is limited and that we should cherish our times with our loved ones. At the age of 23, I met the woman of my life. Her name was Sarah, and we worked together. At first, I was dismissive of her attempts at flirting with me, mainly because the numbers above her head said 65,000 when we met, which was around 7 years. I started liking her, and soon that friendship grew into a love I never experienced before. Sarah was smart, compassionate, and kind, but that timer was a constant reminder of her lifespan. So when things started getting serious between us, I opened up to her. For the first time in many years, I told someone else about the gift I had. I expected Sarah to dismiss my claims just like everyone else did in the past, but she believed me right away. And then the hard question came. She asked me when she was going to die. I asked her if she really wanted to know, and after a moment of hesitation, when she finally said that she was sure, I told her. The look on her face changed from morbid curiosity into grim acceptance. She tried to smile, but I could see that this hit her pretty hard. We were crazy in love by then, and she asked me if I still wanted to be with a woman whose life was so short. She didn't need to ask. Sarah was the light of my life, and I would have gladly chosen 7 years with her than 40 years alone. She and I made plans, the first one being a wedding and then traveling all over the world. We really wanted to visit Japan ever since we were kids, so that country was on the top of our list. That trip never took place, however, because 2 years after we started dating, we got married, and right after that, we got our first kid, a beautiful baby boy. We named him Ethan, and for a while, we were the happiest parents in the world. As time went on, Sarah started to change. I could hear her crying at night, and I'd often catch her cradling Ethan and whispering to him with a trembling voice that she will always love him, even after she's gone. She knew that she didn't have much time left, and it broke my heart, because she would not be here to see her son grow up. She tried to hide it from me, but I knew it was very hard for her, so I did my best to support her. Instead of wallowing on her misery, she accepted that her time was almost up, and she enjoyed the remaining time she had with Ethan and I. On the night when she was supposed to die, a number 4 mockingly flashed above her head. That house was extremely quiet. She tucked our son into bed and kissed him goodnight, reminding him how much she loved him and how she would be watching over him. She watched him sleep for a while, and after that, she came back to our bed. We made passionate love one final time and spent the night cuddling. Sarah asked me what she was afraid to ask this whole time. I knew that she wanted to know and assured her that Ethan would live a long and healthy life. She cried in relief and made me promise that I would be a good father to him and that I would remind him of his mom and how much she loved him. I choked back on my tears and promised as I hugged her tightly. We fell asleep like that. When I woke up, Sarah was on her back, pale, her lips dry. Upon touching her, I realized that she was cold as ice. I tried waking her up, but I knew there was nothing I could do. It was too late. The numbers above her head were gone. Ethan must have heard me, because he knocked on the door, asking if everything was okay. Through tears, I told him not to come in. He asked if Mommy was okay, and I just kept telling him not to come in. Somehow, I knew he could sense that something was wrong. The rest of the day was a blur. Despite trying to hide everything from Ethan, he saw an ambulance arrive. He saw me in distress, and he saw the medics carry out the body of his mother. Sudden arrhythmic death syndrome, they said. But I knew had it not been that, something else would have happened. Car crash, murder, accident in the kitchen. No one could escape their fate. 4 years later, I did my best to uphold my promise and raise Ethan the way Sarah would have wanted. Things have been hard without her. I thought about her every day, and it was difficult trying to explain to a boy why most of his school friends had both parents, whereas he only had one. I didn't get back into dating all those years either. The mere thought of dating another woman repulsed me, even though I know Sarah would have wanted me to be happy. I know it probably sounds stupid, but my entire world revolved around Ethan after my wife passed on. And then one day on a Saturday, as I was making pancakes for Ethan, I noticed he was a little quiet. When I asked him what was wrong, he said that his friends Matt and David called him a liar. I asked him why they would do that and nearly choked on my piece of bacon when he told me that he can see numbers above people's heads. But no one believed him. He didn't yet know what it meant, and I did try my best to stay calm, as I promised him I would explain everything to him when he was older. I told him that he had a very special gift like a superhero, but that he was too young to use it, and that in the meantime he shouldn't tell anyone about it, otherwise he would be in danger. He didn't ask me about the numbers again after, but I figured he probably deciphered them on his own when he grew up. Years later, Ethan had become a grown man and moved out, finished college, and found a decent job. He was dating a nice girl and planned on proposing to her. I was as happy and proud as a father could be, and then one day he called me and said he needed to talk to me about something. He said it was important that he couldn't talk over the phone. I invited him over, and as soon as he was done with work, he came over. Right away, I could tell by the grievous look on his face that something was wrong, even though he tried hiding it. When I pressed him to tell me, he broke down and told me how he knew everything about the numbers. He said he tried saving other people, but failed every time. In that moment, he reminded me of myself so much, back when I was younger. I remembered how I felt when I was his age and tried helping the people who were about to die, only to have them meet their demise nonetheless. But then, through teary eyes, he told me he came here to tell me something far more important. He said that the number over my head was extremely low. When I asked him how low, he said 6,581. I chuckled. I already knew it was low. Not the exact numbers, no, but I knew that my time was almost out. I told Ethan that I went to the doctor and was diagnosed with cancer. It was discovered too late and there's nothing they can do. When Ethan protested, saying there must be something we could do, I shook my head. We both knew the answer. I told him that I have no regrets. All I ever wanted since he was born was to make sure he had a good life. And now that he was his own man, I was ready to let go and die in peace. Truth be told, I also really missed Sarah, and if dying would help me see her again, I would gladly accept it. We cried for a while, and I told him how proud of him I was, and that I always knew that his mother was too. When he was about to leave, I explained to him that death was inevitable, and that instead of trying to warn or save the people who were almost out of time, he should show them acts of kindness before they go. We didn't have the power to stop them from dying, but we had the power to make their departure easier, to help them see a light in a world full of darkness. He agreed and thanked me for listening to him. I watched him drive off, and then I went back to the house, turned on my computer, and opened the browser. There were probably some cheap tickets to Japan that I can buy.